some more people. All right. Oh, but now I'm on screen, so I guess we are officially gonna start. So, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for the chapbook launch of Blue Moon, the Ono no Komachi Poems with Terry Ann Carter and Heather McDonald. Thank you all so much. So my name is Delane Just, and I just recently started as the executive director here at Jack Pine Press. You can use she or her pronouns for myself. We also have Logan McManus on tech support and kind of in the background there, and we really thank her for all of her support throughout this event as well. So before we get started, we also do want to make a land acknowledgement. As we're all coming in together here from many different places and time zones, like all across the country, we do want to acknowledge that Jack Pine Press and myself as well is located on Treaty 6 territory, the unceded territories of the Nehiwak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Dene nations, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. And we also have Terry Ann reading from the traditional territories of the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, and Heather is located in the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe First Nations. So then some other technical things as well. We welcome audience engagement throughout the whole launch in the chat function on the side of your screen. Feel free to put your snaps and claps and messages sending to everyone there if you'd like, or just to us if you'd like as well. And we welcome questions in the chat function as well, or the Q&A function, which should be at the bottom of the screen there. You can put your questions for our two co-authors in that section as well. And there will be a chance for the Q&A just around the end of the event as well. So for live text captions, you can use them through Zoom as well. They can be turned on or off by pressing the live transcription icon at the bottom of your screen. And I think that's most of the technical Zoom related stuff. So now I'm just gonna do a brief introduction of Jack Pine Press as well for those of you who might be meeting us here for the first time. So Jack Pine Press is based, as I mentioned, here in Treaty 6 territory, Saskatoon. We were founded in 2002, and for almost 20 years, we've helped poets and artists make weird, beautiful, and handmade poetry chapbooks. We encourage collaboration and the sharing and learning of new skills, as well as the intersection of artistic disciplines and an exploration of what a book can be. So Jack Pine Press also receives support to do what we do from Sask Arts. We'd like to extend our sincerest thanks to them tonight as well for making it possible to bring wonderful poetry and books like the one we're celebrating tonight to you, our audience. All right. So then with that, enough from me. So now I'll introduce our two authors tonight. So we have poet and paper artist Terry Ann Carter, who is the author of 8 collections of long-form poetry, 2 haiku guidebooks, and 5 haiku chapbooks. And she has edited 4 haiku anthologies and is a past president of Haiku Canada. And we also have Heather McDonald, who is a painter and who teaches Japanese painting, sumi-e, while pursuing formal studies in shodo, Japanese calligraphy. And she's been creating art and handmade books for many years and recently began learning mokuhanga, which is Japanese printmaking, and sashiko, Japanese traditional embroidery. She's a lover of poetry, particularly the Japanese forms, and has managed to write a few decent ones, it says in her bio. She figures another 100 years of study should be just about right. And she's working on her website, The Way of the Brush, and has started an Instagram account that you can follow at Sumi Heather. And we'll try to include some of those extra links for websites and social media in the chat function for you to check out as well as links to purchase the books at the end of the function. But with that, I'm just going to pass it right over to Heather to introduce the next section.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's so nice to see so many good faces in this event that's been so long coming for Terry Ann and I, but so rewarding as well and enriching. So I just want to share a little bit about how we got started, and the inspiration for the book, Blue Moon, came out of a workshop slash retreat I did in Montreal with a very well-known artist and Zen translator from San Francisco. And during the time I spent at the Zendo, which is a Japanese Buddhist, I don't want to say temple, but it's like a temple. I studied calligraphy with him. I studied Shodo. And one of the things that came out of that was the calligraphy for Blue Moon, which was actually blue, done with blue paint. So it was such an inspiring experience for me. And subsequently, when I showed it to Terry Ann, this just galvanized us into this project. And I made a little video of my time there with some music. There's no speaking, but I did want you to sort of see some of the experience that I had there in terms of the scene where it was Kaz himself, who is still going strong and now in his 80s and world famous, really. And you'd never know it because he's so humble. He looks like someone from another era, and he is actually from another era. But he had a profound effect on me in terms of my attitude towards calligraphy, and it has stayed with me. And I hope that you will enjoy or get a sense a little bit about this experience by watching this little video. So this workshop took place in Montreal. As you can see, it was 2013 when this all came about. And Kaz is not only an esteemed teacher in Shodo, in calligraphy, but is a very well-respected translator of Dogen, which is the Dogen was responsible for bringing Buddhism to Japan, and he's also very involved in actually a lot of haiku work, which I didn't know either. So meeting him was a revelation, and this, when I showed this to Terry Ann and we started talking about it, it just seemed to spark something that we pursued, and so this was the beginning of Blue Moon.
So fantastic. Thank you so much, Heather, for sharing that with us and our audience as well. We're going to now invite Terry Ann to read a few of the poems from the book itself. And then we'll get into our next section. So I'll let Terry Ann take the floor.
Thank you, Delane. First of all, Ono no Komachi was one of the 6 best waka or tanka poets in the early Heian period of Japanese literary history. She was born around 825 and died in 900. These dates are, records weren't kept, and so scholars figured that this is approximately her time. But she was well known for her beautiful poems, her tanka, and her beauty. And so I'm going to begin with a few from the opening of the book. A tanka is a 5-line Japanese form. In Japanese, there's a very strict syllable count. In English, the 5 lines are sort of incorporated into a wholeness of a short poem. Cicadas sing in the twilight of my mountain village. Who will visit and ease this loneliness? Never a moment without longing. How lonely I find the seaweed-filled bay, the pines of Tokiwa Mountain. Love and longing were great themes of Ono no Komachi's. And what I am doing in these poems is I'm writing in her voice. So I'm trying to put my poetics into a time that would have been such a long while ago. And I tried to emulate how the themes of her poems worked in my own poetry. Night deepens with the sound of owls and a calling deer. I am aware of this unrequited love. The hunting lanterns on Mount Ogura are dimmed. I too have lost my way, am calling like a deer to its mate. From my doorway, I see the seaweed gatherer. Doesn't he know there is a harvest here in my arms? Like a ripple that flows out to the shore, my love follows the rim of his robe, morning light through the window. I think that's all I'll read at the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry Ann. And we'll have more readings from Terry Ann throughout the evening as well. But I think our next thing on the agenda is a video of the kind of bookmaking process with some dialogue from both Heather and Terry Ann alongside, and they're going to kind of show us how the book started and then how it became the book we have now, which I have 2 on my screen here, and the little wrap you'll note as well. Because I suppose there's the pictures online, but those of you, I know some of you have pre-orders out there. This is what it'll look like when it comes in. So we'll watch now a video of kind of how it started as an idea and then became this here. So,
So I'm going to be asking Logan to pause because this is just a really quick overview. So here, if we pause just for a second, Logan, as I mentioned, once Terry Ann and I saw the first video together, Finding Blue Moon, as I like to call it, we started working on developing her poems into finding a way to contain them, but display them and enhance them by adding artwork or whatever. And so we just sort of started off in my basement, where you can see we're on the floor, by taping the pages together that we had printed out. And initially we just started with, well, where will we put the calligraphy for Blue Moon? Because let's just put it in there somewhere. So we started with that. And if we could just go to the next slide, Logan. We, from there, started to think about, well, maybe we should choose some more words that are from Terry Ann's poems, and then maybe add some calligraphy to those words. So what you're looking at now is, again, us working on the floor or on my table in the basement and just sort of figuring out, okay, where would we put the calligraphy? These are examples of computer calligraphy that I quickly printed out to make placeholders. And then we sort of played around with them like a puzzle. So if we can go on to another slide. And there's Terry Ann on the floor, placing things together and just sort of trying to figure out a chronology of the poems and how they would flow together. And in so doing, if we go to another slide, we can see where we really got creative and started putting out these words from the poems that Terry Ann had written. And then as she sequenced them together, and we put in these extra words, we realized that there was another poem overlaying the whole series, sort of a hidden message, if you will. And that made it just that much more mysterious and meaningful, and just added another layer of meaning to the whole set of poems. So that was truly a revelation, Terry Ann, for us?
Yes.
When that was like, oh my gosh, it was really just like somebody had, I don't know, set off a firecracker or something. It was just so exciting when that happened. And so from there, we realized that we had to run with that idea even more so. So what you're looking at right now is Terry Ann had started off with an idea of having it in a scroll format, which I thought was beautiful, and it really worked with the content completely. So we started with that, and that's why you see this very long sheet, because if you go on to another picture, oh, there's a picture of me now writing out Blue Moon, because I started thinking, well, I wanted to have a bit of handwriting in the title as opposed to something that was printed out on a computer. So I ended up writing out Blue Moon using a brush pen with blue ink in it. So how appropriate was that? And that's the title that ended up in the invitation and on the book itself.
Heather, getting back to the calligraphy, you know, your Blue Moon was so beautiful. It just, I just felt we needed more examples of your calligraphy. So what ended up happening, as you can see, as Heather was discussing, those words were coming to a fruition, and Heather said, oh, I can do a calligraphy for lonely. I can do the calligraphy for woman. And so we had a 5-word poem, which became sort of the central, that hidden message. But it was just the idea that one was just not enough. Heather's such a beautiful calligrapher. We just needed more of her work. So there are 5 examples of,
Yeah.
of her beautiful calligraphy. Lonely. Should I give it away, Heather?
You go ahead. It's
I
absolutely.
I
Yes.
think it's okay.
Yeah.
The words form, and this is as the poem sequenced, and we chose certain words. What happened was lonely mountain woman loves the moon. So it was the whole, that's Ono no Komachi. She was in love with the moon. She wrote a lot about it. And so it just kind of fell to us. And it also allowed Heather to, along with the beautiful collages, I think she's going to speak about that in a moment, but to have that calligraphy as an underpinning for the series of tanka.
And I was so happy that Tarianne was really open to that, because you know, she's very, very much supportive, always has been, of me and my pursuit of what I'm doing. And so it was just so exciting to work with someone who was simpatico, who was on the same page. We were both on the same page, if I could use that word, in me, in terms of understanding the poems and knowing who Ono no Komachi was, and you know, being a lover of haiku and tanka myself. So it was really a labor of love for us, with all the iterations that it went through, as you will see. So we can go forward. So this is just a shot of, we were looking at all the, I mean, there's a multitude of stunning Japanese papers that were available to us. But what we were looking at right from the beginning, even though we did change the design, or I changed the design, but there's a certain type of Japanese paper that's made today, where they have been recreating and reproducing the original patterns that were used on kimono in Japan. So part of my my thinking right from the beginning was that we needed to somehow do that, to show our acknowledgement of kimono, because it is an art, and the papers that were used, which of course would fit in with the entire theme of the poetry, and the fact that, you know, this is a woman's perspective on love and loss, and how fitting it would be to have to represent the kimono somewhere in the book. So we were looking at these stunning Japanese papers. There's so many. It was, I think we had it narrowed down, I think at one point to 5, and then 4, and then it was like, oh, now which one do we pick?
It was so hard to choose.
It was so hard, Tarianne?
Yes.
So hard. And
so beautiful.
But again, a labor of love, because we got to look at all these gorgeous, gorgeous things. And I have so many ideas now for the future that my head is spinning sometimes. But it, you know, it was great. So we could just move on to some more, another slide. So I'd like Tarianne to actually speak about these. This is a photocopy, by the way, of original stamps. So I'm going to let Tarianne talk about that, if you don't mind.
I wanted to just mention that my husband worked for Canada Post, and he had a number of friends in international philatelic areas. And so for one of the Haiku Canada conferences, I wanted to thank people who spoke at the conference with real Japanese stamps on a small card. So my husband I was very grateful that he was able to actually secure these, because they're not something you can just go in and buy. You have to know, because they all have beautiful poems there's tanka that have been written on them. So they're a series, and so they were very special stamps, and I had some left over, and I said to Heather, if it's possible, wouldn't it be lovely to use some of these in the collages? And again, you know, because we're sort of on that same page, it was so easy for her. Well, I don't know if it was easy, but she beautifully incorporated many of these Japanese stamps into the collage work that is on the opposite side, the opposite page of the tanka. Thanks,
And
Heather.
Oh, thank you, Terry Ann. It was so exciting when Terry Ann showed me these stamps. I couldn't believe it. They're so beautiful, more beautiful than what you can see from this photo. And it was so precious to me to see the stamps, you know. So I made photocopies of them, and I'm so happy that I did, because I said, you know, I don't even want to touch the original stamp. We can use a photocopy and incorporate the photocopy into the collage safely, you know. But it was so delightful to see these stamps, because each one is a little mini work of art, and I had a really hard time choosing which ones would go with the collages, but we did choose some, so that was really wonderful, a really wonderful touch, I think, as you will see. So if we can go to another slide, please, Logan. So I'd like to point out to everyone that at this point in time, Terry Ann was in BC and I was in Ottawa, and all this collaboration that was going on was long distance for the most part. She was able to come into Ottawa one time, and
that was before COVID.
That was yes, yeah. Everything is pre-COVID, ladies and gentlemen, pre-COVID. And we tried to very quickly, because there wasn't a lot of time, go over, you know, I had a list of things I wanted to talk to her about, and we pulled out some stuff and we started looking at things and stuff like that. So that was all also going on this entire project. Okay. But then I started reworking the collages at home. And so what you're looking at now are the originals that I just put on my table. And I took some papers that Terry Ann had, and then I pulled out, I have an embarrassingly large number of pieces of paper in my house, and pulled all those out. And started thinking, oh, you know, this would go well because of this poem. And again, kimono theme. I really wanted to try and continue that theme and let it flow through the book as it flowed through the poems. Again, woman's perspective. So I started to think, okay, let's try and repeat this as much as we can throughout, and where it's relevant, where it fits. And so this was how I was thinking. So if we can continue on to another slide, please. So the first kimono collage that Terry Ann and I just went nuts for, Terry Ann? And still, yes. I mean, this is, to me, the epitome of this image, the colors, and just how it all looks. It came together for us, and I just thought, oh my gosh, this is it. We've got it. We've nailed it. So
what was so wonderful working with Heather is that I have toyed with collage myself. So we would play with the papers and just talk about them. It was a really true collaboration.
Absolutely.
It was really that.
Yeah. Very joyful. Yeah. And so much fun, because we would be telling stories or would be comparing notes about, well, where did this paper come from? And, you know, I painted this or I created this, and oh, look how it looks against this. It was just so much fun. Terry Ann?
Yeah.
Just so much fun. So let's continue on. Another slide, please. This is just another kimono, again, a collaboration of papers. And if we could go on again to another slide. So this one is one that I wanted to point out too, because it has a stamp, as you can see. And Terry Ann had given me this piece of paper that I think, Terry Ann, you had done in a workshop, right?
Yes.
Was it a workshop piece? Okay, so Terry Ann had gone to a washi workshop and had done some abstract painting on Japanese paper.
With Heather Midori. Heather Midori,
yes.
Yamada.
Another Heather. Yes.
Heather.
Another
Heather. Wonderful teacher and artist here in Victoria.
In fact, if I can just point out that I know Heather as well. And Heather and I were in that workshop with Kaz.
Oh,
Actually,
wow.
side by side in that workshop with Kaz in Montreal. This is before she moved out to BC. So, you know, it's everything seemed to be so synchronous with
Yeah.
what Tarianne and I were doing, and intersecting with the same people, the same kinds of artwork was happening. You know, it was just so cool. Anyway, so Tarianne had given me this, and I thought, oh, it's so gorgeous. We definitely have to use it. And you see where the stamp is? Okay. Now the stamp is right side up. Okay. Now, do you see the woman reaching down? Because what happened was Tarianne went back to BC, and I'm playing with all the collages and redoing them and changing the papers. And I suddenly flipped this one around and I went, oh, there's a woman. Look at this. And so I changed the stamp, reoriented it, and that's how it appears in the book with the poem, which you will see. So just all these exciting things just started to happen. So if we can go to another slide. And again, Tarianne has a wonderful poem about a folk song in the book. And this paper fragment, I knew I had, this is actually calligraphy, and it is an old Japanese folk song. So it had to go into the collage. It had to. It was destined to go in there. So if we can go to the next slide, please. And again, such a beautiful collage kimono once again, and so appropriate for the poem that Tarianne is going to read, which I'm not going to give away, but it's there. If we can
It's
go
the
to
final. Yes, it's the final.
Yeah. So here's where I wanted to pause for a minute just to show you that by this time, you know, after all those collages, this is the same table I was working at that you saw earlier. Here's the second iteration of the book. So now you can see where I had actually created the pages, printed them all out. You can see peeking out, there's some artwork. There's some of the collages you can see. And I was just thinking, oh, this is wonderful. This is perfect, except it's very, very long. So once I started to actually connect the accordion together, because right now it's in separate sections, I realized that it was way too thick. And because we were using a Western format style of paper and printing and trying to make it into a Japanese format, which is pretty hard. So it did not work as an accordion book. It was just too long. So if we could go to the next slide. So this was the original cover. And again, we were really excited about it. You can see the bone clasp there because it was a different design. And I had chosen the white and the wrap cover because, again, thinking about a woman's robe closing over. And I thought, oh, this is perfect. And white is a very traditional color, very important color. But that didn't work either. So I had to rethink everything. And now we're at the third and final iteration. And this is just a little bit of the book inside. So the format is there's a poem on the left and there's an image on the right. And the image you're looking at this point is the calligraphy for mountain. And they're pieces of coral that are holding the book together. So here we are at the finale. And finally, we've come to the actual book as it is now. So I really stuck to a traditional format. So the book is still made with the kimono Japanese paper cover. It's wrapped with dyed hemp fiber and a bone clasp, which is often used in a brush roll, traditional brush roll to this day, and certainly would have been back then. And it's sewn toji format, which is a typical and traditional Japanese book sewing. And I really hope that you enjoy this beautiful, meaningful book.
Thank you so
Oh,
much for that, Heather.
mhm.
Um, I think that I can read a few more poems. Is that
For sure. Let's go into that, and then we'll have
Yes.
a little bit of a conversation afterwards,
yes?
and then we'll do Q&A after that. Perfect.
Okay. If you remember the beautiful red collage that had the calligraphy of the folk song, actually, I'm going to hold it up so you can actually see it here. Here's the tanka that goes with that beautiful collage. Remembering him, I pick red flowers and hum a folk song from childhood. His love will hold me only in dreams and brush tangled hair away from my face. Wind-swept branches of the pine tree by the shore, something in me cascades. The scent of plum blossoms wakes me from the dream of one who comes to me at night. And here's a rendering, beautiful brushwork again from Heather for that particular poem. And this one, which of course was the
Yay.
center, this was the blue moon that started the whole project. We knew we were going to do something with this blue moon. So here's the tanka, blue moon, and the shadow of spring rain falling in marsh. Tears soak the edge of my sleeve. In so many of Ono no Komachi's poems, there are tears, and there's a mourning and a melancholy and a loss. And for a while, when I was trying to bring her voice to me, I live very close to Thetis Lake Park, and I found when I would walk with those beautiful trees all around me, somehow I could try, although it's such a challenge to go back that far and to imagine a woman's life. But somehow in the quiet of the forest, I would sometimes sit down and I would say, you know, things haven't changed all that much in that love department. We still cry when we're sad. We still long for things. We still hold things in our hearts. We still have memories. And this spoke very much to me. So I really enjoyed kind of walking with Ono no Komachi to write these poems. And I was very happy to work with Heather. And this book has, well, as you can see, that video of that workshop was 2013. It is now 2022. We've been talking about it and thinking about it and writing about it for quite some time. So it's lovely to have it come to fruition. I'm wondering if there are any questions from anyone in the audience.
Yeah. So why don't we, as we, those of you in the audience, you can kind of put your questions into words in the chat or the Q&A. And then while you're doing that, I wanted to invite Heather and Terry-Ann to have a bit of just a conversation about what it was like to work together on the project, which I think you kind of segued in perfectly, Terry-Ann, talking about just like how it's been like quite a journey for the two of you. So if you have some thoughts on that, you'd like to first talk on, and then we'll have some questions of the audience, and I have a couple questions too. So excellent.
I think what happened is that initial that workshop that Heather attended, and you can hear when Heather talks about calligraphy, like it's her whole life. And so she came back from this workshop, and wait till you see what I have, and it just seemed to flow. Sometimes projects feel very organic. They're not forced, they flow. And when you can work with another collaborator and a project flows, that's when things are really at their best. So I think we've tried to talk about how different aspects of the how different aspects of the book happened. I noticed there was a question about the secret message. I think that came really later. We had the poems sequenced. We could see, because I said to Heather, we have to have more than just Blue Moon. There can't be just one example of calligraphy. We need some more. So we began to think about words, and then the words themselves formed this particular poem. Or we arranged, let me put it this way, we arranged the sequencing of the poems so that lonely mountain woman loves the moon fell into a sequence within the larger whole. I hope that answers that question. I'm not sure who asked that, but
Marco.
Oh, Marco. Okay.
It was Marco. Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's kind of how, that's because I had written the poems already and was kind of adding to them and thinking about them. And so with the pieces of calligraphy and having that little kind of smaller poem, still in 5 words, which is kind of a kind of an embracement of the whole concept of tanka, which is 5 lines.
Yep.
We shortened it to 5 words, and it was kind of like a little secret that was in the book. It was fun.
Yes, and if I can add to that, just if you're wondering, the translation of the calligraphy is in English at the bottom of the page, so you'll be able to
Yes.
read that secret message. You won't be trying to figure out, well, which one is lonely and which one is woman. It's actually written in there at the bottom, so you'll see it. But that was a really fun and exciting moment. I'll never forget it, because it's just like, when you're a kid and you discover something for the first time, and it's just astonishing and it's wonderful, and you're almost giddy because it's just, you feel like you're the first person ever to have discovered this. And it was sort of like that, when we were sequencing the poems and putting in the calligraphy, and I remember we started talking about it, and I said to Terry Ann, well, what do you think? Which word out of this poem? What about lonely? And then we'd look at that. Okay. And what about love? Because love was a theme throughout, whether it's love in the past or love at the present or in the future. That was obviously a big word. So we had to put love in there. And then, of course, mountain. Well, mountain is such it's a ubiquitous word, but also a very important word in a lot of Asian poetry. Mountains have a spiritual quality to them, so they are very important in terms of poetry and painting and calligraphy.
And she lived and from records
in a mountainous region. Yes,
she lived in mountains.
Mountain had to be in there, and we already had moon. We already had moon, so that was okay. So what was left? Woman. Well, it's about a woman, so woman had to be in there too. And finally there was lonely, because that was really the poignancy of many of the poems, was that she was longing or lonely for that love that was not there. So it was a question of arranging them, and it kind of fell into it, didn't it, Terry?
Yes.
It just kind of happened. We didn't really work that hard to arrange things. I think you did it, and then we realized, oh my gosh, we have another poem here. We have a secret message. So it really was one of those serendipitous.
Yes.
Yes.
Heather, I just want to mention to the audience, my particular copy and Heather designed very specially. This is a different, it's still the blue and white, and it's still a kimono pattern, but it separates our 2 kind of special books from the rest that Heather made. So I just wanted to show you this one, which is
they're both kimono patterns. They're just
both
different. Yeah.
yeah. And
yes.
you know, I think the whole idea of kimono, because you see that kimono, it's an abstraction, but it's there in so many of the collages, that the whole there's a unity to the project. The fact that it was a woman, that I'm trying to emulate the voice of the sense of kimono, the sense of the paper, the collage, the stamps, the calligraphy. It just was a unit. It was just a wholeness that came out of the whole project.
That's so lovely. I feel like also like you two have done such a great job of kind of outlining the entire process and the collaboration. Like some of the questions I had, they were answered because you two both are just I feel like maybe that's the fatedness coming back again too. is but it's so fascinating to hear your work on this project and how it's been like a journey like this whole time as well. Um, and one question that I had too was for Terry Ann, for the way you made the poems of the tanka, like haiku style, did you find that created this kind of creative process in itself, like the limitations of the form that you were using? And what is your experience just using that form in general is what I was thinking about.
It's so interesting. And you use that word limitation, and you see, I never think of it as a limitation. I think of the conciseness of the poem, the brevity of the poem is the beauty of the poem. And so a tanka is a little bit more subjective than a haiku. So there are two more lines. And in those two lines, there's more feeling and more emotion. And it was primarily women who wrote tanka at the very beginning, and it was called waka. It's a form that I think has been tried in Western writing. It takes some time to really get a hold of tanka. And even though I had experienced a lot of haiku poetry, because I was writing haiku, I was studying it, I was attending conferences where people were talking about the importance of this or that in a haiku, and how to strengthen a haiku. Waka or tanka was a little, not, I won't say not available, but I wasn't writing in that form until I read Jane Hirschfield's beautiful book that talks a little bit about Ono no Komachi. And that's where I was introduced to her, through Jane Hirschfield. So because I love Jane Hirschfield's poetry, and I loved her collaboration with her Japanese collaborator, and I don't have the book in front of me. I'm so sorry. I don't have the name of Heather, do you remember?
I remember, but it's the same. The book is downstairs in my bookcase, and I can't remember.
It's called Ink Dark Moon. So you see, even Jane Hirschfield's book has a moon in it. Her book was
all
called
the time
Ink Dark Moon, and they were the erotic poems of there were two poets, Ono no Komachi and I shouldn't do this in the middle of a presentation.
I found them here.
Here it is.
Izumi Shikibu?
That's it.
I just did a quick Google to see the book.
Thank you for that.
Of course.
Thank you. Saved my bacon. Both of those women were very, very well known for their haiku. They were actually poems were placed into larger collections, and that was so rare for a woman. Although I have to say, the period of the Heian Court was the time for women to flourish. That's when Lady Murasaki wrote Tale of Genji.
Tale of Genji,
The first novel was written around that same time. Shei Shonigan wrote the Pillow Book. All of these beautiful, beautiful examples of love poetry, longing, and it's just what people wanted to read.
And
So I
it's
fell in love with Ono no Komachi, her work, and then I thought, what would it be like to try and write in her voice? And so when Heather, it just happened. Heather is showing me this work that she did, and we said we'd always wanted to collaborate on a
we
project.
did
So
actually.
yeah,
This is the second time that we actually
yes,
have collaborated because
yes,
we did a set of haiku books a number of years ago, if you remember,
yes,
at Leaf Shadow, and
yeah,
my artwork is on the cover. I did some editing, some of my haikus in them, and
yeah,
I did the design and layout and all that stuff, and they're lovely little books. I looked at them the other day and I thought, these were really nice. They
yes,
came
yeah.
out beautifully. So I knew we could do it. I knew we could do it. And
That's
and
awesome.
and Terry Ann mentioned Sei Shonagon, and um, she's a particular favorite of mine because she also wrote a lot about life at that time for
Yeah,
women in a certain class, okay?
yeah.
Because she was within the court system. So even though she might have been a lower ranking
A
person,
lady, I think she
she
was a
was
lady in
she
waiting.
was
Yes.
yeah, she was
Ah.
still within the Japanese court system. And so because of that, she had some privileges that other women did not. And she wrote a lot about the fact that um, sending messages to a lover, for example, and the lover sending the message back was very important. It had to be done a certain way. So the women who were privileged enough at that time were taught to read and write, and they wrote in hiragana, which is a women's script. It's very beautiful and flowing, and they would write these love messages or poems to a lover, but they would always be accompanied with something. So they would be wrapped up or rolled up with a sprig of a flower or a branch, um, always with some significance to that, and then sent off via messenger, of course. There was no actual exchange at the door. And then it was expected that the man would respond similarly. So they also had to have a bit of an artistic touch and write beautiful calligraphy, because that was very criticized if you were sloppy. It just was dismissed. So it all had great significance and great importance. And she wrote a lot about this. And so you really get the sense of what that life was like through reading these about these women and how they lived. So
Yeah,
it is true that some things never change. It doesn't matter what
very
era
true.
some things never change, and it's just the format that might change, but the content is more or less the
Yes.
same.
Speaking of that, Heather, there's a quote at the back of the book that I would just like to read, and then I will
For
read the
sure.
final tanka.
Yeah, it sounds excellent.
This is from Jane Hirschfield in her introduction to Ink Dark Moon. We turn to these poems not to discover the past, but to experience the present more deeply. In this way, they satisfy the test of all great literature, for it is our own lives we find illuminated there. I mean, no one can surpass Jane Hirschfield. so, so that's a beautiful quote that I use to kind of set Ono no Komachi's life and her work for the book. And I'd like to now read the final poem. And as you can see, this is where the beautiful, you can see the cranes in that red paper, and they're just, Heather used just the right amount of paper just to give this essence. The last tanka in the collection. Perhaps my ending will be in the sea green mist rising over Tokiwa Mountain, my love like the crane, unbending into air. Thank you, Jack Pine, for accepting our proposal, and thank you, Heather, a beautiful book.
Thank you, Terry Ann. It was so wonderful to work with you, my friend.
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you both so much, and for the lovely art and the lovely readings tonight. It's been very excellent. I feel like I learned so much, and I had already knew more about the book than the rest of you. So I'm sure the rest of you out there have also learned a ton about the making of this book, as well as some history as too, and history of art and everything. So it's been so lovely. And I just wanted to wrap up the evening by saying big thank you to Terry Ann and Heather for this project and for working together with us on this project. It turned out so beautiful. There's a link if anyone's interested in ordering the book in the chat there. And also a big thank you to the Saskatchewan Arts Board and our audience, all of you, for joining us as well. The recording will be available after the event, likely going up on the weekend on our YouTube channel. Hopefully we can get up tonight, but we'll see. For you to rewatch or share as among your friends as well. And yeah, have a great evening. Thank you all so much for
Thank you,
joining
everyone.
us.
And
Thank you.
Delane
And-
and Jack Pine, because again, as
Yeah.
I mentioned, we're talking time zones here.
Mhm.
They're in Saskatchewan, Terry Ann's in BC, I'm in Ottawa. And so the three of us are collaborating and communicating throughout this process, and they've been just fabulous to us. So
Thank you.
again, our sincere thanks to Jack Pine.
Delane, I want to thank you so much for recording, because there were a number of friends, it's 4 o'clock in the
Of course,
afternoon,
yeah.
Victoria time or Pacific time. And a number of friends wrote to me and said they were just either coming back from work, or
Yeah.
they were, in traffic and so to have it recorded and have it on a YouTube just makes it available for people who missed it this time around. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you to Logan too for kind of helping with the logistics
Yes,
for all of that
thank you,
too.
Logan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're like the turnout was still really great, and we're glad we can keep sharing this event on the recording. So, and that we'll get that up as soon as possible. That's just on our Jack Pine YouTube channel. I believe we usually have that linked on the website as well for everyone's convenience on accessing that. And can't wait till all of you also have your physical copies. It's really cool. So, and there were a couple questions about ordering, and you order it through the link on our website. There's a limited run. I believe we have around 60 to 70 for purchases from general purchases. So get your book if you want as one of these special copies of this lovely book. Thank you all so much though, and have a great night as well.
Thank you so much. Have a
Thank
lovely
you.
weekend.
Yeah,
Good night,
happy
Heather.
long weekend.
Good night, Terry Ann.
everyone.
Good night.
Take
Talk to you
care.
soon.
Thank you, Jack Pine.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. We'll save that chat as well, so we can save all the messages for you.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you.
Of course.